In his first speech since he was arraigned on criminal charges alleging he attempted to overturn the 2020 election, former President Trump said Republicans are weak and need to get smart on attacking President Biden. If you took the five worst presidents in the history of the United States and added them up, they would not have done near the destruction to our country as crooked Joe Biden and the Biden administration have done, Trump said at the Montgomery, Alabama rally Friday night. President Biden's son, Hunter Biden, has been at the center of federal and congressional investigations for months. Both have raised questions regarding President Biden's involvement or lack thereof. He shouldn't be allowed to be the president, Trump continued, and the Republicans better get tough and they better get smart because most of them look like a bunch of weak jerks right now, and you got to get tough and smart and you have to fight fire with fire. You can't allow this to go on. Last month, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy said the investigation to the president and his son may soon be rising to the level of impeachment inquiry. Trump focused on his criminal charges at the rally Friday, often shaking off the severity of any case. Anytime they filed an indictment, we go way up in the polls, he said. We need one more indictment to close out this election. One more indictment, this election is closed out. He has a strong lead in GOP primary polls, with national polling averages showing the former president with about 53% support, far ahead of his nearest rival, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. The part of this that's actually really funny before we even get into the seriousness of this stuff is the irony of someone who's been arraigned on criminal charges trying to say that someone else shouldn't be allowed to be president. There's no escaping the irony of that. Even if you thought the charges weren't accurate or whatever conspiracy theory stuff you want to get into, the fact that he has actual charges against him and the thing they're trying to get Biden over is some nonsense with his son. I don't know. I just find it extremely ironic. Like, you shouldn't be allowed to be president because you might have done something with your son. Oh, I'm getting indicted. I'll forget. If you took the five worst presidents in the history of the United States and added them up, they would not have done the destruction to our country. That's a bold claim, and it actually shows you that Trump doesn't really know that much about U.S. history, and neither do most of his supporters, I'd wager, and that's actually a problem we have with the educational system in the United States. So if you go and you look at the actual historical rankings of American presidents, people like Buchanan, Andrew Johnson, generally speaking, there's some kind of nation threatening crisis that came close to the end of their tenure or engulfed their entire tenure that causes them to be placed at the bottom and seen as being very destructive to the United States. For example, Buchanan was president when the Civil War really started getting into effect, or at the beginnings of it began, rather, were initiated. And Johnson very much fought against Reconstruction and was an enemy of African Americans at a time where their rights were really not enshrined at all, just in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War. Um, the younger Bush, who started to appear near the bottom as well, I mean, where do we even begin? He started the longest war in American history, the worst recession since the Great Depression with the subprime mortgage crisis, the worst terrorist attack in American history. And it just seems as if you actually are being objective and fair, Biden, I've got my problems with him. We've talked about, his lies with the student, just we can get into this on a separate video, but if I'm being objective, I can't see him being in the bottom five. I can see Trump being in the bottom five, even though I don't think he should be that low, because many of the problems that he had, same thing with Obama, are mostly holdovers from Bush, with the never-ending wars and the surveillance state and whatnot. But his crisis that would put him in the bottom five would be the virus. Uh, I mean, his handling of that was terrible by any metric of objective reality, and it is a very key reason as to why he lost his reelection by 7 million votes. It wasn't that people loved Biden so much and he was so terrific and we were all so excited for Uncle Joe. No, people were just sick of Trump, especially after that last year. Um, but That's why I said I don't think Trump knows much about American history. I don't think many of his supporters do. I would never put, at least as things currently are, I would not put Biden in the bottom five presidents or five worst at all, anywhere close to that. Um, but where he says Republicans better get tough and they better get smart because most of them look like a bunch of weak jerks right now, it's very true. You look at the Republican Party, especially since the 2020 election, and most of them are too afraid to admit that Trump lost re-election and engaged in illegal activities, whether we're talking about Fulton County, Georgia, or his sort of tipping his finger in both in both jars with the January 6th incident, and they're just not strong enough to confront him over those things, unfortunately. And it is unfortunate because when you are so partisan that you can't call out the leader of your party for engaging in illegal acts because you're afraid that his voters won't support you or they'll turn on you. So I said the U.S. two-party system, especially in recent years, it's started to become something of a cult where people, if they're not on your team, will go after you sometimes for the right reasons or for things that are valid. But if they're on your team, they will defend some of the most disgusting, ridiculous, nonsensical activities you might involve yourself with in. Because let's make no mistake, if the situation were reversed and I don't know, it had been Hillary, who was the incumbent president in 2020, and she was like, I won the election even though I have no proof, and a bunch of liberals and progressives and woke people descend on the Capitol, all the Republicans would have said that's un-American, that's awful, that's terrible. But because they're weak jerks, like Trump says, they have no problem calling him out, except for two or three like Christie or Pence, and to an even lesser extent Murkowski and Collins. But my point I'm making is they are weak jerks, just not weak in the sense of, oh, they don't go after Biden enough. They go after him plenty for stupid stuff, mostly. Oh, he said this, or his son, which has nothing to do with his actual policy agenda. And oftentimes they deride it as being socialist, even if it's moderate by the standards of the actual left wing of the Democratic Party. So he's right that they're weak jerks, but they're that way because they're afraid of the cult that is the Republican voter. They don't want to call out Trump for doing anything wrong. And the few times that they actually make a point about anything, it's usually promoting some Red Scare nonsense. Oh, the Democrats, those socialists, they're going to take away your health care by giving more people coverage. Oh, the Democrats, they want socialized college by letting people go to college free like they do in other developed countries. I mean, they are weak jerks. They have nothing besides lying, um, dodging, criticizing members of their own party, especially the one that has arguably done the most damage to democracy over the last several years. And I can only hope that more of them lose re-election and people wake up and smell the roses. It's really scary just how hypnotized these voters are by this guy.